One of the challenges that thousands of women tell me who've joined the My Menopause Transformation programs over the years is how exhausted they feel. It's a question that I've asked in all of my live masterclasses around the world, and whenever I ask who is feeling tired, and not just, any old tiredness, but this overwhelming fatigue that seems to hit us in our midlife years from 45 to 60 years old. And when I asked that question, most of the room put up their hand. I was the same. So as part of my women's health and aging studies, as women come through the menopause transition, I decided to unpack our menopause fatigue. And what I learned astounded me. It's one of the questions in the menopause symptoms quiz, which is on the My Menopause Transformation website. So please start with that, because a lot of women don't understand that fatigue, this chronic fatigue, is something that is a manifestation of their changing hormonal status as they come through menopause. So as part of what I've done with the symptoms quiz and with the programs that I've run, I've really started to unpack the science of your menopause fatigue. I was so confused myself. And fatigue is always about the muscles. All fatigue starts with the muscles. Yes, it's an impact of our eating, our exercise, our lack of sleep, but there's more going on in menopause than we think. Our muscles are changing, and as we start to go into ovarian decline and natural menopause, the follicles in the ovaries are starting to die off, and what happens is that there are changes to estrogen and progesterone levels. But that's not all the changes that are happening. There are changes happening around the body, because the changing hormonal status in menopause actually affects other hormones around the body. It also affects our nervous system. And these hormones around the body are part of a chemical pathway, the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid adrenal axis. And there are changes going on in this axis. When I take my practitioner courses, I'm always talking about the HPA thyroid axis, but I'm also talking about the changes to the muscle. And the fatigue that we're experiencing in menopause is part of the fact that as we're starting to lose some of the density of our muscles, then there are changes to the mitochondria. You might have heard of that word, but the mitochondria are these tiny organelles that sit within a lot of around our body, in our cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle, and also in our smooth muscle. And what happens is that these mitochondria are changing as we come through menopause. Now, the mitochondria are really, really important. They're important because that's where oxygen is stored, and oxygen is needed to actually make our energy molecules called ATP. So if our mitochondria aren't working so well as we come through menopause, then that can be really problematic for our fatigue levels. And it just means that this fatigue accumulates, especially if we're exercising, if we're not sleeping, if we are, if we're really busy and got a lot on in our day. So we have to look after our changing muscles, and certainly we have to really enhance the ability of oxygen to get into the mitochondria. And that's why I really prefer certainly changing our diet and moving to a Mediterranean diet. I tell you how to do that in my programs. And also I prefer aerobic exercise as well as some resistance training, but not as much resistance training as being advocated in menopause, because you're feeling tired. And until you can turn around your sleep, then you won't get on top of your changes to your fatigue levels. As I say, nutrition comes really important. We also need a couple of compounds that help to reduce our fatigue. One of those compounds is coenzyme Q10. That starts to diminish as we come through menopause. And of course, we need to have a look at our iron levels and our ferritin, that's our stored iron. And these are two of the blood tests that I do like women to take. The complications of fatigue are that we end up feeling burnt out and we can't get on top of our exhaustion, particularly for those of you who have maybe experienced long COVID. That's all about understanding that we need to look after our muscles. We often think that menopause is just about the ovaries and the hormones, but it's not. There are changes going on around the body. I'm Dr. Wendy Sweet from My Menopause Transformation, and what I've done is I've untangled the symptoms of menopause, including your menopause fatigue, and I've put the how-to into some powerful programs. My PhD was on women's health and aging. I've positioned the menopause transition in that research around our health, our longevity, and really starting to understand how we can change our lifestyle to actually accommodate the changes in menopause around the hormones. The declining levels of estrogen, progesterone, and your master hormones, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, impact organs and tissues around the body, including those tiny organelles called the mitochondria, and we need to look after the mitochondria as we come through this really vulnerable stage of our life. It's vulnerable because we are heading into our post-menopause years, and there is an accumulation of inflammation. We know that stress is an impact for many, many midlife women. The thousands of women who've come onto my programs over the years can attest to that. But once we get in place some simple strategies day after day and we make these changes consistent, then we can really get on top of our menopause fatigue. So I want you to go to the My Menopause Transformation website. I want you to do the symptoms quiz. You'll get a video from me about your results. I also want you to listen to the masterclass on menopause if you want to take a deeper dive into your symptoms and also understand some of the strategies around lifestyle change that are so important at this stage of life. Thank you for being here with me. I'm Dr. Wendy Sweet from My Menopause Transformation.